Welcome to the Calder Farmstead.
Now the Ice Hawks back out to center in transition. Carlson with Quenneville 2-on-1. Right when Carlson comes, Quenneville scores!
Here's a chance for Carrick. Fighting scores! Off the face-off! Up it's Eminger. Pulled back to Werenski. Has it. Shoots one. Bounces off a man. 5 seconds left. Werenski. Another jam on the shot. Turning and firing. They go! Scores! They score! Now they catch each other. They both go right over the top. Matching rights to one another. McDermott gets the helmet off of Cassie.
And now with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out right side with Bear. Looks like cutting to the net. Bear will score!
And here are your hosts, Cece and Sean.
Hello and greetings from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
And the cliffs of Moher in County Clare, Ireland.
Welcome to the Calder Farmstead podcast, episode number 90 for Friday, March 11th, 2022. If you were hoping for a podcast featuring tips on potato planting and harvesting, we are not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast, and my name is Cece Hockley, the AHL editor of Full Press Hockey.
And I'm Sean O'Brien from StatsTrack and the AHL's only league-wide analytics guy.
And as always, we thank you all for tuning in with us.
And if you're new to hearing Cece and I talk about hockey, we'd normally be previewing the AHL's weekend here, but we're taking a bit of a 2-week break from our usual preview recap format. We're both fine, so no worries. But the next 2 weekends we're firmly occupied. One of them is St. Paddy's weekend, so I think you can probably do the math there. But rather than leave you out in the cold or kind of half-assing those episodes, we're going to, pull back a bit and take some league-wide looks at the playoff picture this week and the trade deadline next week. Still, if you're new to the podcast, you might want to head over to our podcast feed or YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to us from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to be talking about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're newer to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries, go check that out. So you better be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes. And let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes watching college basketball. It's not March Madness yet, so why bother? You'll never get that time back. So next time, why not spend a little more time with us talking hockey?
Yeah, you don't have to search for True TV to find your favorite basketball team quite yet. Yes. All right. Well, as Sean said, we are going to talk about the playoff races here. Sean, I see the coverage of the NHL, and there are a lot of analytics-minded people and websites that project standings and individual games like you have, but they also have graphs that show the percentages that a team makes the playoffs. I think Money Puck's layered pie chart graph is the one people most are aware of, or that one most people are aware of. There we go. Words are hard. And at least, they have some semblance when that pops up. They're like, oh, I've seen this graph before. First round, second round, third round, Stanley Cup playoff, things like that. Sean, have you bestowed anything upon the AHL crowd that is similar to that? Not
yet. I'm working on my own version of it. If nothing else, just for playoff percentages, percent to make the playoffs. The way to kind of make the way that Money Puck does is not overly complicated. I could do it, but we'll get there in a second. I'm working on my own version, though, mostly because I find the AHL's playoff primer PDF to not be very useful or helpful. Their magic numbers are not, it's like, it says, Tucson's to win the AHL team title is 80. It doesn't matter. That's a made up number. But anyway, models that show playoff percentages like that, like Money Puck or Dom Lucian at the Athletic, use a method called Monte Carlo simulation. So I'm going to get a little more technical here for 15 seconds. So people, if you're not that interested, just click the little fast 15 seconds. We'll be right there. But they use a Monte Carlo simulation where you simulate the season a ton of times through the model's probabilities. And that gives you not just the average points, but the distribution, which is how they have playoff probabilities. Team X makes the playoff this many times. It's not terribly hard to create a Monte Carlo simulation, but it takes a lot of computing power. For example, Dom Lucian's daily updates are using 50,000 simulations of the remaining season. I tried for 10,000 and my computer was not on board with that. I'm in the process of making tweaks to that so on to kind of get everything to work in a way that is reasonable for both me and the computing power that I have. So it should be up and running sometime next week. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But for right now, no, I don't.
Yeah, please don't put out your wife's work from home capability by cranking all that computing power. Just yeah, don't run up your electricity bill doing that. But anyway, we did an episode back around American Thanksgiving talking about the Thanksgiving playoff deadline and how that carried over to the AHL's new playoff format. It was episode number 64 to be specific. So if you want to go back and listen to that, feel free. We'll dive into what we said there, how it's held up, and what the chances are that teams on the outside of the playoff picture get in. And as always, we'll start with the Atlantic Division, and we will go east to west. So without further ado, Atlantic Division. At Thanksgiving, it was Wilkes-Barre Scranton holding down the last playoff spot in the Atlantic, and Lehigh Valley and Bridgeport on the outside looking in. If we go fast forward to today, March 10th is when we're recording this, not much has changed. Sean, you didn't like either Bridgeport or Lehigh Valley's chances to make the leap over Wilkes-Barre Scranton then. Has that changed at all now that we are in mid-March?
No, they're both pretty dead in the water. They aren't mathematically eliminated, but from a practical perspective, pretty much, yeah, they're done. Yeah. Let's talk about the Phantoms first here. As of Thursday evening, the Phantoms are 8 points back from Wilkes-Barre Scranton with 2 games in hand. Wilkes-Barre Scranton has been earning points at a 51.5% clip since Christmas. Even if they slow that down to a 48.5% pace for the rest of the season, meaning from now until the end of the season, they have a 48.5% points percentage. That has them finishing with about 75 points and a 49.3 points percentage over the whole season. To pass them, the Phantoms would need to get 30 points in their last 24 games. That's a 62.5% points percentage pace, or roughly going about 15-9 in the last 24 games. Yeah, they're likely getting Wade Allison back, which is a boost, but let's be honest here. The Phantoms are way more than a Wade Allison away from being a competitive team again. Not to mention the Flyers are 100% going to sell at the trade deadline, which means roster spots in Philly are very likely going to be open and filled by players from the Phantoms. That's great for the players who get to, cash those NHL paychecks, get some experience, that kind of thing. But it's not good for the Phantoms and their playoff chances. So while mathematically alive, them going 15-9 down the stretch while Wilkes-Barre Scranton plays 485 pace, yeah, that's a no from me. Bridgeport, on the other hand, if we keep Wilkes-Barre Scranton at that same pace, the Sound Tigers need 21 points in their final 18 games to pass that. That's a 65.6 points percentage. Or rather, they need to go 11-7 down the stretch. While the New York Islanders are unlikely to move big pieces at the deadline, it's not impossible, which, like Lehigh Valley, means if they do make those moves, there will be roster spots open on the NHL club in all likelihood, and those are going to be filled by prospects from the Sound Tigers. In short, the only chance the Sound Tigers or Phantoms have is that Wilkes-Barre Scranton plays significantly worse down the stretch, and they both play exponentially better down the stretch. That's not impossible, but it's impossible adjacent. Also of note, the Penguins just signed Corey Adanovsky to an entry-level contract. I have no idea who that is, but other people seem excited about it. And yes, the Penguins are likely to be buyers at the deadline, but they seem to realize how thin the prospect pool for them is. And I think that makes them unlikely to make moves that hurt Wilkes-Barre Scranton significantly. And they also have other prospects that are of similar value to what's in Wilkes-Barre Scranton that aren't on the roster yet, that are in Europe or in juniors or something like that. So there are other pieces they can move that won't hurt Wilkes-Barre Scranton's chances of making the playoffs and going, at least to the playoffs at that point. Whereas Lehigh Valley is definitely getting rid of the Flyers are definitely getting rid of pieces, which means roster spots will open up because they're very likely trading for futures. Now, in theory, they could trade for, players that could go in the AHL right now, but it's more likely they're going to get draft picks or guys that aren't AHL ready yet. So, I don't see the Atlantic changing too much at the bottom of who makes it in and who's out.
Yeah, and I noticed just peeking at Lehigh Valley's schedule here, they play Bridgeport 3 times and Wilkes-Barre Scranton 3 times in those last 24 games. And a part of me is like, well, what about strength of schedule? But that can be pretty difficult to predict, especially with, how much the AHL rosters can shift so abruptly, especially after the trade deadline coming up this Monday. It can just completely change the course of what that it would even look like. So here I was going to suggest, maybe you could do a strength of schedule sort of thing, but it would kind of be a moot point, wouldn't it?
A little bit. And the other thing too is, if those like games against Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, or Bridgeport for Lehigh Valley go to overtime, that's basically the same as a loss. Like you're only gaining 1 point in the standings if you win. Right. So, and like 22% of games are going to overtime right now. Again, I think loser points are stupid and we should abolish them, but that's not the way the system works as stated.
No, it isn't. Well, let's shift talk to Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. Let's talk about them jumping the Bears in the playoff spots. While both would make the playoffs in that scenario, it would mean a different matchup for the first round. How likely is that for the Baby Pens?
Not terribly. Let's say Hershey continues to play as badly as it did from February 1st until now. That's a 43.8% points percentage pace, otherwise known as bad. From now to the end of the season, that pace means they finish with about 79 points. Wilkes-Barre Scranton would need to gain 26 points in its final 22 games to pass Hershey playing at that pace for the Bears. That's a 59.1% points percentage pace, or about a 13-9 record. Wilkes-Barre Scranton is probably not capable of that pace, not to mention the Bears seem unlikely to continue to be that awful. TJ Oshie played for the Caps the other night, and he's been out all year. They have other guys coming out from IR. The Bears are slowly but surely getting healthier. So it seems unlikely that they continue to basically play at a last place pace, whereas Wilkes-Barre Scranton would need to pick up the pace significantly to pass them. So that seems pretty unlikely. You could see it's pretty clear to me, though, that the Atlantic Division is set for playoff teams, and the only real jockeying for position we're going to see down the stretch is between Providence, Hartford, and Springfield. They can make moves around all over the place. They're not that far separated, and asking one of them to play, 600-point pace hockey is not out of the question. They've been doing it already most of the year. I think, Hershey and Charlotte could maybe switch spots, but that's also a pretty big leap, I think. I feel like it's the top three can shuffle a bit in the Atlantic, and that's pretty much it.
Gotcha. Well, that wraps that up.
Yeah. The Atlantic Division, not as much excitement going on as you think. Teams still have chances. They're still alive, but it's looking like long shots for anyone to really make a big move here outside of jockeying for position in the top three. But we're going to take a break here. After the break, we will get to the playoff race in the North Division. If you're just here for the Atlantic playoff race, thank you for stopping by. Also, don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, make sure you check us out on social media. Links to our social media, as well as links to all the podcast places you can listen to, our YouTube channel, and some other stuff can be found at our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. We're going to pay some bills, run some ads. We'll be right back.
It's time to look at the playoff primer that we have for the North Division here on March 10th as we record this. Let's jump a little bit back, though. At Thanksgiving, Belleville and Syracuse were in the bottom two of the North. Some things have changed since then. That's putting it mildly. Cleveland was second in the North Division at the time on November 25th, American Thanksgiving. And I have one word for that now because they are in the basement. Woof. Woof. They are in the basement. They are in the bottom of the North Division. They were second. I forgot that they were so high. What a difference a few months makes. But hey, let's focus on the race between the middle here, or in the thick of it, as it were. What are the chances that Syracuse hops Rochester or Belleville down the stretch here, Sean?
It's not impossible, but it's not going to be easy. Rochester has been on a 41.2% points percentage pace since February 1st. Should they finish the season at that pace, they'll hit 77 points and a 50.7 points percentage. That means Syracuse needs to just win 12 of its last 25 games to pass them, and that's obviously very doable for this crunch team. However, it requires the Emmericks to play this bad. Michael Marsh was on the ice today, so was Ryan McInnes. Quinn and Malone appeared to aggravate something in the last games that they played, but nothing I've seen from reports makes me believe they're out for more than a week. Additionally, maybe shorter. Again, not a medical professional. I'm just reading the tea leaves from those closer to the team, like Susie Cool, as well as what the team has officially released. While the Crunch are a solid team right now, they're going to need Rochester to continue to be this bad as they get healthier and their lineup becomes less and less ECHL backfilled. It's certainly going to be a race to the end here, but if I had to handicap it, I would say the Amerks make the playoffs 65% of the time here. I'm not positive when I'm finished with the playoff probabilities that we talked about with the Monte Carlo simulation. I'm sure it's not going to like the Amerks chances because the factors we talked about. The model doesn't know that those guys are coming back from injury. To the model, Marsh, Malone, McInnes, and Quinn are gone from the team forever. And that's how it kind of projects forward because we don't know officially when they're going to be back. So we just always treat them, like they're not coming back. Side note, Marsh, Malone, McInnes, and Quinn sound like the lineup of a banger cover band on St. Patty's Day for like a pub crawl. Just side note there.
Yeah.
And also, too, like we talked about the Penguins, Tampa is likely to be a buyer at the deadline, while the Senators and Sabres are clearly going to be sellers. But I don't think that ruffles the feathers for their AHL clubs like it would for the Phantoms for a few reasons. First, if Tampa wants to add, they're going to have to engage in some wild cap shenanigans at this point, which is not outside the possibility, but it seems unlikely that they just straight have the space to do it. They've maxed out most of their LTIR savings that I can see and are at the cap as it is. So if they're going to add, it's going to have to be dollar in, dollar out, or they're going to have to get wild with it, which is not impossible. Julien Brisebois basically is a magician, but it seems unlikely that ends up affecting the Crunch too terribly much. Second, Buffalo and Ottawa are sellers at the deadline, obviously, but their rentals don't seem like they move the needle a whole lot. I mean, no one is breaking the bank for Zach Sanford, Tyler Ennis, or Robert Hagg. I guess Cody Eakin could get moved, but the Sabres also have Colin Miller, Henry Yokoharu, Butcher, and Jurgensen are likely to be back in the lineup soon. So that should offset anything that gets traded from Buffalo, just getting those Sabres healthy, which means guys from the Amerks won't be getting called up. Maybe one or two actually get sent down. Should the Amerks actually get it together and just play 50% points percentage to finish the season, they'd finish with 81 points. That means the Crunch have to play at a 56% points percentage to pass them. Their percentage between February 1st and now is 55.9. So for the Crunch to get in, they need a teeny bit more points than they're playing right now in the last 6 weeks. And they need the Amerks to play sub 500 hockey while getting healthier. That's certainly possible, but again, it's an uphill battle. I'm not slamming the panic button for the Amerks here just yet. Overall, though, the race is close between the Crunch and the Amerks here to an extent. I still think the Amerks hold a reasonable edge. That's not saying they'll definitely make it, but I think it's more likely than not the Amerks get in.
So what about a team moving up from those bottom slots? Looking at it here, of course, you have Belleville and Syracuse. They're the odd teams out.
Belleville and Cleveland are the odd teams out. Belleville.
Sorry, I was looking at the I was looking at the Thanksgiving standings. Forgive me. Belleville and Cleveland. But how likely is Belleville? How likely is it for them to pass Toronto or Laval to get a bye out of the first round?
That's an open possibility. Laval somehow seems safer, though. They played at a 58.3% points percentage from February to present, but they're 5-5 in their last 10. And I've said it a few times, I don't like that roster. I think it seems to be one that's powered by Kevin Poulin right now. And while I think he's more than capable as an AHL goaltender, I still think he's outplaying his actual ability and is going to come back to earth here. Goaltending is voodoo, though, so
Meh.
The Marlies have been in a bit more of a funk recently than Laval. They were a 46.2% points percentage from February 1st till present. Laval, Toronto, and Belleville all play 72 games, so this is a straight standings point race between the three of them. They've all played 48 games and are at 55, 54, and 53 points respectively. How those three shake out is certainly going to be an interesting race. Personally, I think Laval is the one that ends up, falling out between the two of them for reasons I already stated earlier. but it wouldn't shock me to see Toronto fall out, as they seem much more likely or much more interested of moving pieces up to the Leafs from the Marlies and so on and so forth. Whereas Montreal is not really doing that. Montreal also doesn't have a lot to sell at the deadline. I know the talk has been around Ben Sherratt, but they also have guys on IR who look like they're close-ish to returning. So that should offset kind of any trade moves that the Habs make at the deadline. Same with Ottawa. I don't think they move anything that really moves the needle in Belleville. So I'm not too concerned about how the trade deadline affects them. Toronto might do something, but I don't think it shakes the Marlies too much because they're going to buy. But I think there's a way for Belleville to sneak out of that, but it's going to be very, very close. And it's going to depend a lot on, roster composition, schedule, and things like that. But Belleville could definitely make the leap out. I think Laval could, if they're going to pass anyone, I think it's Laval. But I also openly don't believe in Laval. So we'll see how much they stick it to me.
It's so interesting to me, Sean, how much the NHL trade deadline factors into this, because you have those AHL guys, those NHL prospects that are, seasoning to these deals. And so it's an obvious thing, but I think it's worth mentioning that the NHL trade deadline is going to affect the playoff race for some AHL teams. Maybe not a whole run of them, but maybe one or two. It'll be interesting, especially with that three-way, Canadian wacky races we got going on north of the border there. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. At the top of the North Division, does anyone have a chance of catching Utica for their divisional crown?
No.
There it is.
I guess I should elaborate a little bit more on that to say, besides just absolutely not. Laval is second right now. They are the closest to catching Utica. They would need to win 17 of their last 24 games to catch Utica. And that's if Utica earns exactly 0 points in their final 22 games. So yeah, that's over.
Yeah. Utica with 72 points in 50 games played. Laval with 55 points in 48 games played. They've got a pretty sizable lead there. And
like I said, Laval needs to win 17 of 24 if Utica loses in regulation in 22 straight games. That's a no.
Do you think Utica gets the X, gets the X? Well, I guess the X, is it the X and the Y to claim a playoff spot in the division? Do you think they get it before Chicago in the Central?
Yes. Not because I think Chicago is probably going to outfinish them in terms of points percentage and league, but Chicago has the Moose at least within some level of mathematical striking distance. Chicago's going to win that division. Let's be straight here.
Right.
But Manitoba is at least not going to be mathematically eliminated until later. So because of the gap between Utica and Laval compared to the gap between the others, I think Utica is going to be the first team to clinch the division.
Gotcha. All righty.
All right. That is it for the North Division here. We're going to take a break. After the break, we will go where we always go, to the Central Division here, and talk about the playoff race there. If you're just here to listen to your team's chance to make the North Division playoffs, well, thank you for stopping by. Sorry that it wasn't more, rosier of an outlook for you, but we talk about the truth, and that's it. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. Links to all of that and more can be found on our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. We're going to run some ads, pay some bills. We'll be right back.
Okay, we've covered the Atlantic and the North Division here in our playoff primer episode, and now we're going to go to the Western Conference and talk about the Central Division, as we normally do, the second to last division that we cover, per usual. And at American Thanksgiving, Rockford and Milwaukee were the two teams out, the bottom two teams there in the Central Division. We opined that both of them could jump Texas and Grand Rapids, and neither of us saw Iowa's fall from grace, though, coming, and that's largely in part to the players that have left the roster. Connor Dewar has been in Minnesota since late December. Same story for Matt Boldy. Just continuing to rack up episode after episode of the Boldy and the Beautiful with Minnesota. Kalen Addison has been up with Minnesota several times. Nick Swaney's hot streak to start the season has cooled considerably. And Hunter Jones has made a number of starts in net that have not gone well. Regardless, this is the most competitive playoff race in the AHL right now, as Grand Rapids, Rockford, Iowa, and Texas are all competing for those last two spots in the Central Division playoff race. Let's start with Texas, Sean. How realistic are the Stars' chances for getting into the playoffs?
Not as good as you would think. Texas, Iowa, Rockford, and Grand Rapids, as you said, are 7th, 6th, 5th, and 4th in the Central, respectively. Texas, Iowa, and Rockford all play 72 games, while Grand Rapids plays 76. Currently, Grand Rapids and Rockford are at a 50% points percentage pace. If they can hold that to the end of the season, that means Texas needs 73 points to pass them and be a playoff team over both of them, because they need to jump 2 teams here. That means Texas has to play at a 59.5 points percentage pace to catch them, or roughly they'd need to go 13-7 down the stretch to get there. That's a big ask for a Texas team that's played at just a 50% pace since February 1st and only 55% in their last 10 games. So like, while they've been trending upward, they have not done so at the speed they need to in order to catch 2 teams ahead of them.
Almost winning 2/3 of their remaining games.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
a little shy under there. And like,
sure,
13-7. Yeah. If some of those 7 go to OT, or like, then we can, but more or less they need 13. They need 26 points. That's a lot. And you could convince me that Texas was capable of that if Jake Ottinger were there. He is not.
He is not. No.
Also a pretty good shot that one of Braden Holtby or Dobby gets moved at the deadline, which means, if Dobby gets moved, he's no longer on the Texas Stars. If Holtby gets moved, someone's got to go back up Ottinger. It's probably Dobby, which means he's not on the Texas Stars. So it's not looking great for their, outcomes, especially too. They also have another big piece. Dallas has a big piece to trade in
Joe Pavelski.
No, I don't think they trade Pavelski. I can't think of his name all of a sudden. Defenseman. Where's number 3?
Klingberg.
Very good. What's that?
John Klingberg.
Klingberg is probably on the move, which means that someone from Texas is likely going to have to go up to Dallas, which means bad things for Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not impossible that Texas makes a leap here, but it's hard to look at that and want to bet on Texas to make this jump. As for Iowa, to jump over Rockford or Grand Rapids while both continuing to play at a 50% points pace, they'd need to go 12-8 roughly in their last 20 games. That's a little more achievable, but the team has not been good recently. Iowa also runs into the problem of what Minnesota does at the deadline. Minnesota is very obviously going to be buyers at the deadline, with a dead cap penalty of doom waiting for next season and a ton of cap space at the deadline. Minnesota is in right now win the cup mode. They're trying to win this season right here, right now, because if they don't, good luck next year, guys. 14 million in dead cap space is going to hurt. But prospects like Adam Beckman, Alexander Kavanov are certainly on the table. I could see Damian Giroux being part of a package as well. That's definitely going to make it harder for Iowa to make the leap here. So, and that's with Grand Rapids and Rockford. They only need to jump one of them. But if they play at just 50% pace, which is not a huge unreasonable ask, especially as Rockford's, gotten a little bit better recently. They've started to kind of get it together from what I've seen. Their last 10, they're 4-6, but that's not too far from a 500 pace. Grand Rapids just got Barber back. That's a big piece for them. They are 5-5 in their last 10, a 500-point pace. So you need these teams to play a little bit worse than that, and you have to go, 12 or what did I say, 12-7, 12-8 in their last 20 games. It looks close in the standings, but that's a big ask for some of those moments there because of games in hand. And Rockford and Grand Rapids are obviously neck to neck here, and their positioning matters for exactly home ice advantage in the first round. But that's really it. There's no chance either of them jumps Milwaukee to get a first round bye. So home ice advantage for basically a series between the two of them is what they're battling for. And that's not nothing. Although, strangely enough, both teams have better records on the road. So maybe you don't want home ice advantage. In short, the Central Division playoff spots are certainly not out of reach for Texas or Iowa, but they need both of those teams to get their act together, and they need Grand Rapids and Rockford to play a little worse than they are right now. So I'm not betting on either to make the leap over them. It's possible, but I would not call it likely.
Yeah, and it's just to go back to Iowa real quick, Sean. They were first place on November 25th. They were first place in the Central Division over Chicago. Of course, if you're first, you're over everybody. But Chicago, now in first place, continues to play well, continues to ride that Podorowski. I always mess up his last name. Nason. Thank you. The Podorowski, Nason, whoever else line, insert forward here. But Iowa, it's just amazing how when your prospects are trending or are better than where you thought they were going to be, and it's like, oh, well, we're going to keep them up here in Minnesota. We mentioned Dewar, we mentioned Boldy, we mentioned Kalen Addison. I mean, those are three of some of your premier players at the AHL level, and now they're just gone. I mean, of course, Trevor Zegras comes to mind for Anaheim and San Diego last year, but I mean, last year was a bit of a cluster, it was a bit of an anomaly. So, but
also,
with all
Addison,
that,
sorry, go ahead, finish your thought.
Oh, I'm just going to say, it's amazing how, 2 or 3 prospects are pulled up to the NHL club. It can just completely derail your AHL or your AHL season, let alone your AHL playoff hopes.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you're, because those prospects are in all likelihood some of the best players in your roster, and you're going to replace them with, guys who are lower on the roster, and then the guys that replace them are replacement level players. That is literally the definition. But right. It's so you're taking, some of your best players and you're backfilling the lineup with guys that probably aren't good enough for this league. Like, that's going to torpedo your chances to win. And also, Kalen Addison's been in Iowa for most-ish of the season, and I thought he's played fine from an eye test perspective, but his production has definitely been down, and there are some, a little bit of a downgrade on where his ceiling might be. I still really like him as a player. I think highly of him, but it has definitely not been as smooth a season as it was last year, where he won best defenseman for us. But I think a lot of it too has been, they've had some goaltending inconsistencies where early in the season it looked like, oh no, this is Andrew, the Hamburglar is going to, just waltz it through for us. Derek Baribeau looked rough around the edges, but still good. But yeah, then they got a bunch of Hunter Jones games that didn't go so smoothly. And Zane McIntyre's been good, but has also had some kind of games where you're shaking your head too. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride for them. I think they're a more exciting and more interesting team than, say, Rockford or Grand Rapids, but they are where they are because of what's happened to them right now. I could see them making it, but at the same point, it ain't going to be easy.
No, not at all.
Well, Cece, do you want to take us to break here? I've taken the first 2. I feel like I should pass at least one off to you.
Sure. Sounds good. All right. Well, we're just going to keep plugging along. We've got one more division to cover in the Pacific. And we're going to take a breather. So after this break, we're going to get to like I said, the playoff division. I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but yeah, the Pacific division for the playoffs. Let me get it straight. Get it straight, CC. Now, if you're just here for the Central Division, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you can get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. Links to our social media, as well as links to our YouTube channel and popular podcast links can be found at our Linktree page. We do the memes, and I think we do them pretty well, fairly well. So go check it out. We post different memes to different social media sites. And so you got to subscribe to all of them. That's just how it works. Anyway, our Linktree page is linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. I don't know how Sean ended up in Ireland, but we have to pay for that as a podcast.
Just March, kidding. How didn't I end up in Ireland?
Very true. Very true. So anyway, we have to earn some money. So we shall return very shortly. Okay, we're almost done. We're going to cover the last division. Of course, we go from east to west. So the Pacific Division. And at the American Thanksgiving cutoff point on November 25th, San Diego, Tucson, and San Jose were the bottom 3 teams in the Pacific. And just like then, San Diego, Tucson, and San Jose are still there, albeit in a different order. However, there is a pretty big gap between them now. So let's start at the bottom. San Jose, they were there on November 25th. They are still there on March 10th as we film this. Are the Barracuda dead in the water, as it were?
Almost. If San Diego gets 20 points in its remaining 22 games, and Tucson gets 20 points in its remaining 21 games, neither of which are point paces that are out of line from what we've seen from them this season, San Jose would still need to go 12-8 down the stretch to make the Pacific Division playoffs. Yeah, that's not impossible, but it's certainly for a big ask for a team that's only won 18 of 48 to suddenly win 12 of 20. Tucson is in a better position, though, I think. San Diego continues at a 50% points percentage pace. Tucson's probably toast. They would need to go 16-5 down the stretch to pass them. If San Diego continues on a 46.2% points percentage pace, which is their pace from February 1st to present, they'll only need to go 11-9, Tucson will, to pass San Diego in the standings. The problem here with all 3 of these teams is what their NHL clubs do at the deadline. That is going to be what shifts this race in a big direction here. All 3 clubs not making the playoffs. They're all going to be sellers at the deadline. But the questions become what moves and what do they get in return for it? There has been chatter of Anaheim selling John Gibson, which means Lucas Dostal finishes the season in Anaheim because, well, you need 2 goalies. That's a loss for San Diego and could very much contribute to them not making the Pacific Division playoffs. Arizona is basically looking to offload anything that isn't nailed down. So a lot of players moving there, but what they get back in return could be, AHL level prospects, or it could just be picks. They have so many pieces that they're looking to get rid of. It's a good chance they get AHL pieces back, but do those AHL pieces go to the AHL is another question in of itself. San Jose has pieces to sell off as well, but they also might not, decide to do too much selling at the deadline, which means then they have to make do with what they have, which isn't too great to begin with. So unless those net AHL returns that actually go to the AHL and do something, a Gibson trade would probably do that. So would Phil Kessel, but it's difficult to see the wind shifting here too much unless like Gibson gets traded and Kessel doesn't somehow, or something like that, for it to really shift how I view this race right now. Still, there are a lot of balls in the air here in terms of what their rosters are going to look like in 2 weeks after the deadline. Seeing as all 3 certainly have had stretches of disaster, it's not impossible for Tucson to jump the playoffs over San Diego or San Jose to make a push and get in. None of them are impossible per se, but given the way things look right now and kind of trying to, read the tea leaves going forward here, it certainly seems unlikely, but a lot of the answers to these questions are going to be solved once the trade deadline hits and we know what the return is, or if there is a return for guys like John Gibson, what Phil Kessel nets the Coyotes. Does that mean Matias Michelli comes back? Does that mean he stays with Tucson or stays with Arizona? Does Ben McCartney go up to Arizona? Lots of things like that are going to affect how these teams, go down the stretch. And it's real uncertain right now. But if I were a betting man, I think San Diego makes it to the 3 of them.
Now, looking back at American Thanksgiving, it actually looks like Colorado was the 7th spot in the Pacific Division. So San Diego and Abbotsford were tied at 500, right above them. But Colorado was actually at 467 points percentage. And Colorado surged up the standings, and they are now currently 3rd in the Pacific Division. Granted, Bakersfield nipping on their heels by 0.002 percentage points. It's just like we kind of predicted in our preseason. I know we're focusing on Thanksgiving here, but even though we kind of got the teams a little incorrect, which does happen, We're talking preseason predictions. We don't know how well. I mean, we couldn't have foreseen rather how well Jordan Gross was going to do as the leading scoring defenseman coming out of Colorado, especially after pretty much taking the year off. Playing a handful of games for the Arizona Coyotes last year. But I digress. We in the preseason we predicted that middle of the Pacific Division was going to be clustered, and that's exactly what's happening. And so for that middle there, is it even wise at this point to try and make a prediction of what teams are going to be in what seed?
I mean, 3 and 4 look. I mean, they're separated by basically nothing. So, like. Colorado is, and the Pacific Division is easier to do than the rest of the other divisions because they all play 68 games. So there is no, This is a true standings points race here. But they have 4 games in hand over Colorado right now and are just a little bit behind. So that one's going to come down to the wire of who's 3 and who's 4. I don't think Abbotsford jumps either of them. They seem like they have too much ground to make up. They're 3 points back of Bakersfield with the same number of games played, and they just had a bunch of call-ups go up to Vancouver, if I remember correctly. And they've kind of been up and down and all over the place because Vancouver's been pulling guys up, sending them back a bunch that have been key players for them. So Abbotsford seems like one that's probably going to stick around that 5 or 6 seed. Same with Henderson. I don't think they're going to be making too many big moves or big charges up the standings here. They could probably catch Abbotsford, but that's still like they only have a game in hand and are 4 points back. So as long as none of them go on a huge slide here, which still could happen, I think you're going to see the biggest shifts between Colorado and Bakersfield. On Stockton, it looks like it's just too much ground on where Ontario is right now to drop there, but they could. It seems like you're kind of battling between, Abbotsford and Henderson for that 5-6, Colorado, Bakersfield for that 3-4, and then somewhat Stockton, Ontario for that 1-2. But I don't see anyone making any big jumps over those kind of groups. They're going to kind of sort those pairs out themselves with San Diego, Tucson, and San Jose playing for a final spot there. I still think is pretty likely to be San Diego's.
And, talking about Vancouver having Abbotsford just an hour east. Yeah, it's amazing how much more, willing and readily you'll pull a prospect from your AHL team when they're only an hour away instead of in, I don't know, Utica, New York.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but
I'm sure Utica is not complaining about their new arrangement right now.
Oh no, in many different ways. I mean, it's working out pretty well for both Abbotsford and Utica. All I have to say is poor Binghamton. But anyway.
I do not have that to say about Binghamton.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll move on then. And moving on, I guess that's it. That is it for the show. That's it for episode number 90. We had a quick one today. And thank you for watching and or listening to us. The Calder Farmstead is part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and a number of other great hockey, sports, and pro wrestling programs at fullpresscoverage.com. Yes, we cover a whole multitude of sports and sports entertainment. Just click the podcast drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website. You see that big list and hear it populating, and enjoy. And as always, we appreciate you tuning into us when you have so many great options for podcasts, both in the Full Press Coverage Radio Network and elsewhere. So thanks for that.
And if you are enjoying the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're listening on Spotify now does ratings. So does Amazon Music or Amazon Podcasts or Audible. Any one of those, they all do ratings. Please leave us a rating. Or if you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment what you thought of the episode. Doing so helps others find the video or helps others find the show, and your reviews help us improve it. You can also follow the show on social media at The Calder Farmstead on Facebook and at The Calder Farmstead on Instagram and just at Calder Farmstead on Twitter. They wouldn't let us sneak the in there. Links to all of that and more can be found in our Linktree page at linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's AD_DYSFUNCTION. So you can make music for you too. Cece, where can people find you?
Well, my name is CC Hockley, and you can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at FPC_AHL. Just kind of caught everybody up on some two-way contract signings from the past week. So you can also find me on my personal Twitter account at CCHawk, SEESEEHAWK. Mainly tweet about hockey stuff, but got to put my Wordle scores up on there. Got to put, well, I don't have to, but you know what I mean. Pro wrestling tweets, music, films. Hopefully, if it keeps me interested, it's not going to be bullshit for you. You can also check out my writing on the Full Press Coverage Network at fullpresshockey.com. But enough about me. Sean, where can the people find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien, and you can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SeanObrien81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien_81. Sean O'Brien81 on Instagram is a different guy. Mm-hmm. You can find my stats work at my Tableau page at bit.ly/data-dump-and-chase. If you heard us talk about the Monte Carlo simulation and playoff probabilities earlier, that's where it eventually will end up. But you might want to check that out. So keep that in your bookmarks on your Google Chromes and your Firefoxes and that kind of thing. That again is bit.ly/data-dump-and-chase, all lowercase, all one word. Cece, take us home.
That will do it for episode number 90 of the Calder Farmstead. For Sean O'Brien, I am CC Hockley, and we're going to go enjoy the weekend. So until next time, keep your stick on the ice.